Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, and today I'd like to talk to you about the use of cavalry in warfare. Infantry is the most essential part of any standing army, but it becomes rudimentary without support from the cavalry. The dominance of cavalry in warfare has proved insurmountable in all of military history, from the Mongol Empire and their swarms of deadly horse archers, to the tall armored cuirassier of the French Napoleonic era. Their superiority even holds true to today, as the new swift-moving shock troops have left the saddle and moved into the driver's seat of the tank. The capacity of cavalry is myriad, and so to understand cavalry's importance, we need to identify all of the roles they've filled throughout history. The ability of the horse to move at great speed and with agility has led them to be employed most notably for reconnaissance. Speed allows the cavalryman not only to quickly evade an enemy force that he spotted, but it also enabled him to report that information back to his superiors at a pace that couldn't be matched by any infantry. Those same advantages, speed and agility, made the horsemen ideal for harassing and delaying enemy troop movements. Lighter cavalry could move in to deliver fast charges on the flanks of enemy formations before quickly retreating to avoid prolonged close-quarters combat. This harassment-style tactic worked very well, but it was still risky, and so consequently we see development in history with the horse archer, which the Huns and the Mongolians deployed, and the dragoon, a mounted soldier with the shorter carbine type of musket from the Europeans. This allowed the cavalry to move up quickly to deliver a volley into an enemy formation, which in turn didn't require the horseman to actively engage with his enemy. This ranged style of harassment worked very well against large bodies of troops and columns. We can even see this tactic come to fruition in the Battle of Gettysburg, when John Buford of the Union stalled a massive contingent of Confederate soldiers with just a small division of dragoon-style cavalry. The most obvious use of cavalry to commanders and film directors, however, was their employment as shock troops in battle. This would mean that on top of their indirect harassment role, they played an integral role on head-on assaults against both infantry, artillery, and other cavalry. And ostensibly, cavalry charging straight into the front of a formation would seem suicidal, but often ranged troops, in the 1600s for example, could not produce enough firepower to seriously hinder the effect of a cavalry charge. And so this would mean that even if the cavalry charge wasn't aimed towards a flank of an infantry position, they could still deal serious damage. This would lead to the advent of the bayonet on the infantry musket, a direct and versatile deterrence against cavalry and infantry alike. But if infantry was not in full preparation to utilize their musket and bayonet, they would be particularly vulnerable. An example of this can be seen with Lieutenant Colonel Colburn's brigade in the Battle of Albuera in 1811, when his entire brigade was charged and nearly destroyed after an attack on the flank by French lance cavalry. The damage that cavalry impressed on their target extended far past physical harm as well, as even the mere sight of a cavalry charge could lead to the infantry routing off the field, which would result in the cavalry pursuing and cutting down anyone in flight. The only real counter that the infantry had to the cavalry was trying to form square formation. This formation was impenetrable to cavalry, but extremely vulnerable to artillery and other infantry, as it required an infantry regiment to, as the name suggests, form a dense square. The formation, as demonstrated here, is one that was designed to secure all of the flanks and layer those flanks with several lines of bayonets. But unlike popular belief, this would not mean that the cavalry would simply crash into the wall of bayonets and face a quick death. The actual effect of the square formation would deter the horses themselves from even making the charge, making them easy prey for musket fire as the horses stopped mid-charge to prevent colliding with this wall of bayonets. The last thing I'd like to mention is the crossover role between direct attacks and indirect attacks. This would be raiding, which could ruin the economy of an enemy and spread panic and unrest throughout their country. There were two notable types of cavalry raiding tactics. The first type was more often than not conducted as part of the normal foraging that a large army would require to support itself, while the second form was a directed, highly aggressive operation intended to break the enemy's spirit, a tactic the Huns would use when mass pillaging on their conquest of Europe. A particularly famous example as well would be the chevauché tactic that cavalry used during the 100 Years' War, in which a force of light cavalry would systematically destroy one village after the next. Team this with cavalry charges in battle, and you'll soon realize that cavalry can be the determining factor in winning both a battle and a campaign. Their devastating effect would remain present for most of military history. Even by the time of Napoleon, 1/6 of all Napoleonic armies were made up of horse troops. The obsolescence of the mounted charge was inevitable by the advent of the machine gun and long-ranged artillery. This made cavalry charges extremely costly and dangerous. An example of this can be seen with the charge of the Light Brigade in 1854, in which an accidental head-on charge resulted in the near destruction of the British Light Cavalry Brigade. And just decades later in World War I, the transition between horse cavalry and a more efficient prototypical motorized cavalry would begin to take place. Thanks for listening. I'd like to thank my friend Alexander Blake for helping me write this video. I'd also like to thank all my patrons on Patreon for making this video possible. Alexander Blake, Emmanuel Kang, Emerson Salmarin, Ademski, Derek Bello, Alex Williams, and Joe Crispin. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.